This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Kristen Lemoyne. Life and Adventures of Santa Claus by L. Frank Baum. Chapter 11 of Claus's Adulthood. How the First Stockings Were Hung by the Chimneys. When you remember that no child, until Santa Claus began his travels, had ever known the pleasure of possessing a toy, you will understand how joy crept into the homes of those who had been favored with a visit from the good man, and how they talked of him day by day in loving tones, and were honestly grateful for his kindly deeds. It is true that great warriors and mighty kings and clever scholars of that day were often spoken of by the people, but no one of them was so greatly beloved as Santa Claus, because none other was so unselfish as to devote himself to making others happy. For a generous deed lives longer than a great battle or a king's decree of a scholar's essay, because it spreads and leaves its mark on all nature, and endures through many generations. The bargain made with the Knook Prince changed the plans of Claus for all future time. For, being able to use the reindeer on but one night of each year, he decided to devote all the other days to the manufacture of playthings, and on Christmas Eve to carry them to the children of the world. But a year's work would, he knew, result in a vast accumulation of toys. So he resolved to build a new sledge that would be larger and stronger and better fitted for swift travel than the old and clumsy one. His first act was to visit the Gnome King, with whom he made a bargain to exchange 3 drums, a trumpet, and 2 dolls for a pair of fine steel runners, curled beautifully at the ends. For the Gnome King had children of his own, who, living in the hollows under the earth, in mines and caverns, needing something to amuse them. In 3 days the steel runners were ready, and when Claus brought the playthings to the Gnome King, his Majesty was so greatly pleased with them that he presented Claus with a string of sweet-toned sleigh bells, in addition to the runners. "These will please Glossie and Flossie," said Claus, as he jingled the bells and listened to their merry sound. "But I should have 2 strings of bells, one for each deer." "Bring me another trumpet and a toy cat," replied the king, "and you shall have a second string of bells like the first." "It is a bargain," cried Claus, and he went home again for the toys. The new sledge was carefully built, the Knooks bringing plenty of strong but thin boards to use in its construction. Claus made a high rounding dashboard to keep off the snow cast behind the fleet hoofs of the deer, and he made high sides to the platform, so that many toys could be carried, and finally he mounted the sledge upon the slender steel runners made by the Gnome King. It was certainly a handsome sledge, and big and roomy. Claus painted it in bright colors, although no one was likely to see it during his midnight journeys, and when all was finished, he sent for Glossie and Flossie to come and look at it. The deer admired the sledge, but gravely declared it was too big and heavy for them to draw. "We might pull it over the snow, to be sure," said Glossie, "but we would not pull it fast enough to enable us to visit the faraway cities and villages, and return to the forest by daybreak." "Then I must add 2 more deer to my team," declared Claus, after a moment's thought. "The Knook Prince allowed you as many as 10. Why not use them all?" asked Flossie. "Then we could speed like the lightning, and leap to the highest roofs with ease." "A team of 10 reindeer!" cried Claus, delightedly. "That will be splendid! Please return to the forest at once and select 8 other deer as like yourselves as possible. And you must all eat of the casa plant to become strong, and of the gralla plant to become fleet of foot, and of the marbon plant that you may live long to accompany me on my journeys. Likewise it will be well for you to bathe in the pool of Nares, which the lovely Queen Zurline declares will render you rarely beautiful. Should you perform these duties faithfully, there is no doubt that on next Christmas Eve my 10 reindeer will be the most powerful and beautiful steeds the world has ever seen." So Glossy and Flossy went to the forest to choose their mates, and Claus began to consider the question of a harness for them all. In the end he called upon Peter Knook for assistance, for Peter's heart is as kind as his body is crooked, and he is remarkably shrewd as well. And Peter agreed to furnish strips of tough leather for the harness. This leather was cut from the skins of lions that had reached such an advanced age that they died naturally, and on one side was tawny hair, while the other side was cured to the softness of velvet by the deft Knooks. When Claus received these strips of leather, he sewed them neatly into a harness for the 10 reindeer, and it proved strong and serviceable, and lasted him for many years. The harness and sledge were prepared at odd times, for Claus devoted most of his days to the making of toys. These were now much better than the first ones had been, for the immortals often came to his house to watch him work, and to offer suggestions. It was Necile's idea to make some of the dolls say "Papa" and "Mama." It was a thought of the Knooks to put a squeak inside the lambs, so that when a child squeezed them, they would say "Ba." And the Fairy Queen advised Claus to put whistles in the birds, so they could be made to sing, and wheels on the horses, so children could draw them around. Many animals perished in the forest, from one cause or another, and their fur was brought to Claus that he might cover it with the small images of beasts he made for playthings. A merry Ryl suggested that Claus make a donkey with a nodding head, which he did, and afterward found that it amused the little ones immensely. And so the toys grew in beauty and attractiveness every day, until they were the wonder of even the immortals. When another Christmas Eve drew near, there was a monster load of beautiful gifts for the children ready to be loaded upon the big sledge. Claus filled 3 sacks to the brim, and tucked every corner of the sledge box full of toys besides. Then, at twilight, the 10 reindeer appeared, and Flossie introduced them all to Claus. They were Racer and Pacer, Reckless and Speckless, Fearless and Peerless, and Ready and Steady, who, with Glossy and Flossie, made up the 10 who have traversed the world these hundreds of years with their generous master. They were all exceedingly beautiful, with slender limbs, spreading antlers, velvety dark eyes, and smooth coats of fawn color spotted with white. Claus loved them at once, and has loved them ever since, for they are loyal friends and have rendered him priceless service. The new harness fitted them nicely, and soon they were all fastened to the sledge by twos, with Glossy and Flossie in the lead. These wore the strings of sleigh bells, and were so delighted with the music they made that they kept prancing up and down to make the bells ring. Claus now seated himself in the sledge, drew a warm robe over his knees, and his fur cap over his ears, and cracked his long whip as a signal to start. Instantly the 10 leaped forward, and were away like the wind, while jolly Claus laughed gleefully to see them run, and shouted a song in his big, hearty voice. With a ho, 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 and a ha, 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 and a ho, ho, ha, ha, he. Now away we go o'er the frozen snow, as merry as we can be. There are many joys in our load of toys, as many a child will know. We'll scatter them wide on our wild night ride, o'er the crisp and sparkling snow. Now it was on this same Christmas Eve that little Margot and her brother Dick, and her cousins Ned and Sarah, who were visiting at Margot's house, came in from making a snowman, with their clothes damp, their mittens dripping, and their shoes and stockings wet through and through. They were not scolded, for Margot's mother knew the snow was melting,